All right, folks, let's talk craziness in Florida. Now, we see what's happening with African-American studies and what's happening. Do you know what these fools are actually doing? They now are allowing PragerU, the hardcore right-wing conservative site, to now provide educational materials to students in the classrooms. PragerU Kids, an offshoot of PragerU, they're going to have they got videos pushing right-wing propaganda. There are roughly 350 videos on the PragerU Kids YouTube channel, range from anti-Black Lives Matter messaging to colonialist apologia, climate denialism, and the deradicalization of Martin Luther King Jr. Seriously, John Knefel, senior writer with the Rapid Response and Media Matters, joins us right now. And here's the deal, John, that people need to understand. Two Texas billionaires gave PragerU $7 million to start. They raised $22 million the first year, $25 million the second year. And their whole goal was to reach millennials and Gen Z through their YouTube channel. New York Times did a big story on them. This is a perfect example of how the right wing in Florida is allowing right-wing ideology to come in. So while they're trying to get rid of DEI, they're attacking CRT. They got no problem with these nutcases having their videos shared in classrooms all across Florida.
Yeah, PragerU Kids is absolutely right-wing propaganda. There's no other way to say it. And as you just mentioned, their early funding came from two hydrofracking multi-billionaires, Dan and Ferris Wilks. So much of the PragerU Kids curriculum is explicitly embraces climate denialism, and that helps to explain why the curriculum or the programming writ large, as you said, is chock full of anti-Black racism, anti-LGBTQ messaging, inaccurate history, propaganda. Really, the list goes on. And this is now approved for use in Florida public schools from K to 12.
It is crazy what we're seeing here. But again, this is what Ron DeSantis is doing. And people need to understand what their strategy is. They do not want, and I keep saying this here, all these folks freaked out when white kids were protesting in the wake of George Floyd. And what they're trying to say is, oh, no. We cannot have these white kids out here learning the other American history, which is actually the factual one.
Exactly. One of the videos that I think encapsulates what's going on so well is that there's a mini series, a sub series in the PragerU Kids universe where these two white kids, it's an animated show, these two white kids go back in history and visit historical figures. And in one of the episodes, they go back and visit Booker T. Washington. And this episode is instructive for a couple of reasons, one of which is that it provides truly awful history of the Civil War. The fictional Booker T. Washington tells these kids at one point that in describing the Civil War, he says, hundreds of thousands of men died in a war that resulted in my freedom. So what this line tells us is that it completely erases the that enslaved people liberated themselves, and all of the existing scholarship on the Civil War says that that is the most historically accurate way to understand the conflict itself and the lead up to it was Black people and enslaved people organizing to free themselves, freeing themselves, fighting alongside the Union Army. And then later on in that episode, the fictional Booker T. Washington says, remember, children, future generations are never responsible for the sins of the past. And then one of the kids says, okay, that's great. I'm not going to feel guilty about this historical stuff anymore. So as you were just saying, this is a total reaction to kids of all races learning accurate U.S. history, and most importantly, learning how that history continues to order the present and continues to inform racist domination, class exploitation, and other forms of oppression that we live in the United States. And this is an attempt to sort of cancel out any of that progress and revert to this comforting and false notion that there's kind of progress in the United States that just happens automatically, and that we have lived in a country of maybe there's been racism in the past, but there were never racists. And either way, it doesn't have anything to do with the present moment.
Absolutely crazy. Go to my panel questions, Reese.
Yeah, I just wanted to make a comment that this isn't about education or teaching. It's about indoctrination. And it's funny how Republicans project that the liberal left or the progressives are the ones trying to indoctrinate people when that's exactly what they're trying to do. That's my comment.
Absolutely. Greg? Greg, you're on mute.
Sorry about that, Roland. Thank you, man. Yes,
there you go.
What you think about? Listen, thank you. Well, thank you. What you think about this attempt by these well-funded things like Prager? And I've looked at the Prager University website and the Prager Kids. Seems like the biggest views they get is like the ones between 300,000 and 400,000 for the cash course videos, which I suppose is a riff on Clint Smith and them's crash course videos. I saw the Frederick Douglass video to Lilo and Layla. I think that had 185,000 views. Ida B. Wells, another close to 150,000. But the Martin Luther King was 6 months ago posted when these kids go with him only about 37,000. And the Booker T. Washington only had about 28,000. I guess my question to you is, what does these kind of ventures say about the disruption of learning models and the increasing kind of attempt to intervene with digital platforms to displace classroom instruction, and whether or not that's effective? And then the other question has to do with whether any of this will really matter in the classroom, just because you can use something if it's not attached to assessment or driving instruction in that way, whether or not this will make a dent at all.
To the first point about indoctrination from the previous panelist, one thing that's so important to understand is that Prager, the founder, Dennis Prager, recently admitted at a conference in Philadelphia held by Moms for Liberty, which is designated as a hate group by the Southern Poverty Law Center, that it's a fair statement. That's his phrase, quote, a fair statement to say that PragerU indoctrinates kids. So I absolutely agree that this is about indoctrination. As to the point about the context of this disrupting classroom models, again, I think it's very well made, and that PragerU Kids emerges or is launched in 2021, coming out of the COVID lockdowns and the right-wing backlash, specifically against teachers' unions, and so this is what, when you see the so-called emergence of the so-called parental rights movement, especially in Virginia, that pushed Glenn Youngkin's gubernatorial campaign, and of course, parental rights is a euphemism that means schools should prioritize the bigotries and anxieties of middle and upper class, largely white families, and not prioritize parents who are Black, who are LGBTQ, who are immigrants. And that the parental rights movement has always been about privileging some parents over the others, but I think that PragerU Kids is a very specific response to the power of labor and to the power of unions during COVID to demand safety regulations. And as far as the degree to which this is going to be adopted, it's a completely open question. There was local reporting from an NBC News affiliate that surveyed 10 school districts, and only one of them, this was a couple days after the announcement that the programming had been approved. And as of that point, only one school district had sort of said, yeah, we might use this. We'll sort of see how it goes. And a bunch of others had said they hadn't had a chance to review it, or that the window to approve curriculum had closed for this year. So I think that what you're seeing right now, especially in Florida, but also around the country on programs like this, is that people learn about PragerU Kids and they're really, really unhappy about it. And if you exist outside the right-wing echo chambers, this kind of stuff is totally radical, and it's ahistorical and anti-scholarship and all the rest of it. So I think that we are going to see a lot of parents contest this and push back and say this is completely inappropriate for schools. We're seeing a little bit of that already, and I think it's only going to grow. Crucially, PragerU is trying to use this approval as a pry bar to get into other states, and to use this approval to confer legitimacy on them. And I think that the more attention that is on the content of what's in these videos, the harder it's going to be for them to get approval in a sort of hush-hush way, which is the way that it happened in Florida, and I think really kind of surprised everyone.
Candace?
Well, you mentioned the parents, and my question is about the parents. What is it that they can do when the time comes in order to stop this? And do you see them as having the power to be able to stop this in Florida?
What we've learned over the last couple of years is that school boards are incredibly powerful, and the right has really tried to flood school boards with bogus complaints, tried to hijack school boards with very far-right extreme candidates. That's right out of the Moms for Liberty playbook. And I think that is going to be the site where a lot of this is contested. Parents can lobby their school boards, they can lobby their principals, they can organize within their districts, because ultimately the decision about whether schools are going to use this material is one that's made district by district, and then on a smaller level in school to school, and then in classroom to classroom. So I think the other thing that's important to remember here is that the protections that come from teachers' unions are absolutely crucial for teachers who see this and say, I don't want to include this in my curriculum because there's no merit to it. PragerU is not an accredited university. You can go to their website and it's right there at the bottom. It says this is not an accredited university. It's infotainment. And so I think that the key is going to be organizing locally, defending labor rights, protecting your local teachers union, and making sure that school boards are not completely taken over by these astroturf groups like Moms for Liberty.
All right, then. Look, it is, again, I keep telling people, the battle is over controlling the narrative. That's what it boils down to, and that's what you see happening right here, how the right wing plays this. And so while a lot of these, progressives are focusing on entertainment, stuff along those lines, these folks are playing for keeps. John, we certainly appreciate it, man. Thank you so very much.
Thanks for having me.